Hello, this is Ian from the famous Autohub show, and I have a legend, Mr. Lloyd Steeves the second, I believe, in his home garage. Got a pretty snazzy car there behind him. But maybe you can tell me a little bit more about your story. There's a lot of people in the car business that are in the car business, but very rarely do you hear how they got into it, or what they're doing in it, or what their theory is. So maybe you can start with how you got into it and where you're at these days.
Sure. Thanks, Ian. I appreciate it. Yeah, my that's my wife's '57 Bel Air behind me. We thought we'd be out here in the shop so we could be a little uninterrupted. I got in the car business probably like most people by accident. Actually, not really. I started very early. I actually bought and sold my first car when I was 12 years old.
Wow.
That's the benefit of being the second is you could get my dad's name on the title pretty easy. So we won't say what state we're in and when that happened, but you can imagine my mom's surprised face when I drove home with my bicycle in the trunk of an old beat up Camaro. And what are you going to do with that thing? Well, they weren't laughing. A couple of weeks later, after a tune up and a wash up, and we doubled my money, and that kind of got things started. So always had a passion for cars, loved them. I was the kid that instead of comic books, I was reading Auto Trader magazines. I was at the convenience store waiting for them to come out with the ink all over my finger. So got in real early. But officially started in the car business in 1998 at 22 while I was finishing up my college career.
Fantastic. It actually reminds me a lot. I don't know if you're familiar with Jimmy Pattison, but Jimmy Pattison is one of the wealthiest Canadians. He owns companies also in the US, including Ripley's, believe it or not. He has about 60,000 employees. His combined companies made about $14 billion last year. And he started selling cars in high school as a young man. He's 94 now. I met him a year and a half ago. And he said, they asked him, I saw an interview with him, and they're asking him, they said, okay, so when you sold cars in college, Jimmy, did you walk home? He goes, oh no, they gave me a ride,
Yeah.
which I thought was hilarious. But what was funnier about that interview is that he spent most of the time during the interview talking about how he really loves banks. No, I'm just kidding. He really dislikes banks. But it was kind of interesting hearing sort of the annal of I went from this bank to this bank to this bank to this bank, and it's just kind of funny. But even though he's in multiple industries, he's still a car guy at heart. And obviously, has
Yeah, I
been.
think once a car guy, once it gets in your blood, it's hard to get it out. That's for sure.
So did you start in retail cars, or did you just start
Yeah.
in oil and gas, or what did you do?
Started selling Chevrolets in South Carolina.
Yeah.
Got an opportunity. Had a couple sales managers took a chance on a young kid that was convinced him that he wanted to finish his undergrad, and had a great owner that supported that. So I was able to go to school at night. Started at 6 o'clock and on to the evening, 2 nights a week, and we correlated days off and allowed me to get out to make the school on time. So I got my undergrad, and then shortly thereafter, we sold a bunch of cars and went into F&I. And 6 months into F&I, I said, well, I got to finish up and get my MBA. So again, adjusted the schedule, went back, got my MBA, and continued there. And did BDC manager, sales manager, a couple different stints in finance, and kind of did that. Worked there for about 5 years. And then was called away for an opportunity. Took a little bit of time off, trying to figure out in my mid-20s, do I want to stick with the car business? Do I not? You always have that moment, right?
Yep.
And we decided that we were going to stick with it. So went back in and managed a BMW dealership as a general sales manager, and kind of was there for a couple of years, and then off to Greenville, South Carolina to Sonic for some more BMW Mini experience, and then back to Columbia, South Carolina to the same BMW store, only different ownership, and away we went. Kept it going from there.
Yeah, so I mean, it sounds like you've had a lot of experience, in a lot of areas, and obviously a lot of different monikers, whether it be General Motors or BMW or Mini or other brands. I've had the experience of working retail for brands, but also with a lot of brands. And as we look at sort of where the auto industry is today, especially with new entrants and other things, what do you think the biggest challenges are today with sort of the highline brands versus, say, your mainline brands? Like, what do you
You
think?
know, I think everybody's dealing with the same thing, and that's the affordability. I mean, even luxury brands have kind of gotten price skyrocketed out, and with heightened interest rates, and hopefully those things will start coming down here now. But
Yeah.
we just so much technology is in these. The cars are so complicated; they're just so expensive to build, and that's not the manufacturer's fault. We wanted that, right? As
Yeah.
consumers, we said, bring us high end cars, give us all kinds of doodads, and then of course we complain how expensive they are because that's what we do as human beings, right? But no, great. They're great cars, and they all make amazing vehicles now, and the technology permeates throughout. But it just drives that cost to produce up and the complexity. So I think that's kind of where we are. Is you've got super complex vehicles, ultra high tech systems, and they're expensive to build and retain and replace. So that passes a cost on the consumer, and that's really the number one thing that's out there is affordability right now.
So what do you think on the affordability side? I mean, I used to be a lease manager way back, but leasing, I think even in the domestic side is now come back. I mean,
Yep.
what do you think that leads for? Do you feel that it's going to be a longer lease, like a 48 or 60-month lease? Do you think it's going to be just, new leasing products? I mean, how do you think you're going to make that, say, $80,000 3 Series or whatever they cost these days, or 5 Series, or X5, for example? I
But
mean, how do you think you're
leasing's
going to make that?
definitely where it's at, and anybody that's worked with me at any given point, especially when during the Highline years, knows that leasing was 100% where it needed to be, and it definitely drives the affordability down for the consumer, and also gives them the best options, especially with expensive vehicles, not to be
Right.
completely tied in. So yes, leasing will make a resurgence, especially as cars are still scarce in the marketplace because of the just lack of vehicles that were produced during COVID. So that 2-3 year old car, they're not as plentiful. So I think we're going to start seeing some deals on shorter term leases, i.e., 24-month, 30-month leases, and that's what I'm seeing in the Honda and Kia brand, which is where I am now. And those shorter term leases put the car in the marketplace and also get them out of the marketplace sooner, so it'll get it out of that. Oops, sorry, there's an acorn hitting the roof,
Yeah.
but. Um, that's gonna help drive that used car supply back up in that 2 year old car that we
Right.
really need and the consumer wants.
And what do you think on the used car side? I know we've seen some crazy used car prices.
Yeah.
Do you think that's coming back to reality, or do you think that's still kind
Well,
of
I think it's I
crazy?
think it started to. We saw some declines in normalized depreciation over the last several months, but as what we're hitting now is hitting another model year changeover, and the model years that are changing over, the 3 year old car is at its scarcest
Yeah.
point, and the 2 and 3 year old car at its scarcest point. So that's going to hold things steady. So I think it's going to be model specific based on their day supply way back when. For instance, the Stellantis products, obviously, they maintain product all the way through. So they're going to see normalized appreciation, and then that's accelerated with the price decreases that they're putting out there in the marketplace now. Whereas, the imports and the cars that, were the most scarce during COVID
Right.
builds are going to be able to retain that value and maybe even see a slight uptick in the near future and return to more normal depreciation a little bit later on into 2025.
And what's your thinking there on? I know front end gross isn't what it was 2 years ago. What's your feeling on sort of unique finance situations or finance products? Or more importantly, when you look at companies like Agora, Autotech, and other companies that are focusing more on the subprime market, do you feel that the finance product penetration and options is going to be sort of the way that we move forward, or what do you think there?
Well, I think F&I always is a huge part of profitability of any of the dealerships, right? And the hand in hand partnership between a sales desk and F&I makes or breaks that. So at the end of the day, I think we need to offer the consumer what they want. I mean, at the end, it's all sales, right? So
Yeah.
we were just talking about your experience and kind of 20 questions and things like that, but find out what the customer wants and give it to them. It's really
Yeah.
not that difficult. And I think that same thing holds to F&I. So those extended service contracts need to be customized. If for instance, if you're only going to drive 10,000 miles a year, you don't need to get quoted a 6 year 100,000 miles. You're
Right.
never going to get there. And now you're priced yourself out. So, again, let's spend some time with the consumer and figure out what they want, and then away they go. As far as, secondary finance and those type of things, there's going to be some pressures. We're already seeing pressures
Yeah.
on affordability, as we talked about earlier. And we're seeing some defaults, and some refinancing is going to happen when interest rates lower a little bit too. So there's a lot of people underwater right now. So those different ways of financing, it's still going to be a smaller percentage. Most people are going to follow the traditional path, at least I think.
Right. And what's your feeling on the fixed op side? I know we don't talk about it a lot, and I did have the opportunity to interview UVI at NDA this year earlier on. And I think that technology is interesting when you compare it to Hunter and stuff. But what surprised me today, because I had to go in for an oil change and a recall, was the strength of prepaid service contracts, prepaid
Mm-hmm.
maintenance. So it's not only does it make it easier for the customer to build that into a payment, but also it makes it easier for the service writer and service manager and parts person who goes, hey, this is covered. Did you want to do these things versus, oh, this isn't covered. Did you want to do this, this, and this? And I thought that was really interesting because years ago I had a product. I was at I think a Stellantis store, maybe an Alpha store, and the salesperson who is a service writer was trying to sell me, I don't know, fuel injection cleaner or something. And then as soon as I objected, he was like, no, you don't have to buy it. I'm like, well, no, you kind of need to know to do that, but it's a lot easier to do that when you have that sort of prepaid maintenance. But more importantly, when you look at fixed ops, I think that's going to be a huge win over the next, say, 2-3 years with people that are underwater. I mean, what are you doing on the service side of the house to sort of drive that? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's really about retaining the customers and bringing the customers back into the store. So compelling offers on, it's no different than it has been. It's, compelling offers on around the wheel, basic maintenance items. Yeah, and you touched on a really interesting point. When we look at the sale of a vehicle, most people budget on a monthly payment. I mean, that's what they do,
Yeah.
right? I mean, not everybody's writing a check, or if they are, they're getting it from the credit union or wherever. So it's a monthly payment, it's a monthly expense for the vast majority of people that own a vehicle. And so being able to wrap either leasing along with a prepaid maintenance contract, and you put a holistic approach to solving the customer's automotive needs, then you're right, that does make it easier, and it gives them a compelling reason to come back to the dealership. When you combine that with a dealership rewards program, which we have at the Scott Auto Group, there's an advantage program. So,
Right.
Pennsylvania state inspections for our customers and their families are free. And that's $26 for a state inspection. They still have to pay for emissions, but that's just something that we're giving somebody just to come back to the dealership every year, and we get to give their car a checkup, and they're going to need to get it done anyway. So we give it to them for free. We want to keep the customers returning to us, and it's about the experience, whether it's more convenient by a prepaid maintenance or making sure that we're packaging things up based on what they need, not what we think that it needs by mileage, right? What do they really need?
Yeah.
Because and also it's that human touch. It's getting to know and building a relationship with the customer. You want to go and you want to see the same service advisor every time,
Right.
just like you'd like to see the same salesperson every time. Which I think is another challenge that we have in the industry right now, is a massive turnover.
Yeah. I mean, if you made, Rolls Royce money a couple of years ago, and now you're making, Byway money or 7-Eleven money or whatever it might be, discount money, that might be a challenge. But also, when I look at service retention, it's funny, years ago, I worked for a company, did a lot of work with General Motors stores in the call center side of the business and campaigns. What shocked me was the amount of people that maybe got a free oil change when they bought the car and never came back, or
Yep.
recalls. I mean, we did a show a couple weeks ago about recalls, and what was shocking to me was the mean average recalls done on vehicles that customers own across brands, with the exception of Stellantis, which is really high. I think it's like 70%, was something like 30%. So there's 70% of those customers who have something wrong with their vehicle or potentially wrong that people just didn't call for whatever reason. But also, what was interesting when you look at the parts department, and I always use the example of Harley Davidson or maybe even BMW, for example, the amount of gear that could be sold to that customer who's a loyal fan of that brand anyway, whether it be in service or sales or whatever, is kind of interesting to me. But when I look at retention, service retention, so General Motors at the time, this was years ago, they were hoping to retain 40% of their service customers. And I was like, 40%? So 60% hate you that much? They said, what do you mean? 60% aren't even coming back for the free oil change? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, that's not an acceptable number for me, but what do I know? So what's your...
No, it's customer retention, is a key, and that's about, like I said, you've got to give them a compelling offer. There's a perception that the dealer is more expensive than the independent.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
And it's pure. And if you do the math and you do a competitive study, and we've done it, I've done it in multiple markets all over the place because you want to know what you're competing against. And then what you find out is by the time you read all the fine print, and this and the other thing, go to the oil change place down the street. By the time you get out of there, you spend $10 more than if you just came to the dealer. And then we've got factory trained technicians, and we're
Yeah.
apprenticing our people, and we're teaching them how to work on your brand of car.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just makes more sense. But I think there's a major perception issue there. And years ago, we wanted to make sure that we service people's car when it was convenient for us, and not as when it's convenient for the customer. And I think that's why a lot of these independents and third parties got in there and were able to
Oh, yeah.
to take that attrition. But now, we have to take the stance that we want to retain every one of our cars, because as well as I do that if you have a loyal customer that purchases a vehicle from you, you give them a great experience. They come in for a service, you give them 2 or 3 great experiences in a row. And even if you bobble the ball just a little bit, as long as you don't completely drop it, now
Yeah.
you have them retained and they're going to come to you. They're building a relationship with you.
Yeah.
Well, when their next person in their family wants to buy a car or they're up, guess what? They're coming right back to you. And that's what builds that brand loyalty that drives the long-term success of the dealership.
Yeah, I mean, I always like to compare it. That's great points there. I mean, I always like to compare it to restaurants, and I think there's a stat in the restaurant industry that if you go to that restaurant more than twice, like on a third visit, they pretty much own you unless they do something dumb.
Yep.
That's pretty much I think the stat in service. But the thing that is kind of interesting when I was training BDCs way back, and I'd be training, say, a new service BDC staff. The number one thing that I would always do with them is I'd pick up my cell phone. I'd say, okay, let's call Jiffy Lube, let's call Walmart, let's call Minute Lube, whatever. Let's call these, because they were convinced the same way you were talking about, which is, yeah, we're too expensive. So what I would do is I'd call these different places and go, hey, I have a Chevy Cruze 2014 or whatever it was. How much for an oil change? And some of the stuff that you would hear would not only be shocking to your point, it was like not only it's more money, the experience was horrible. Like I remember calling a Walmart location, and I think that car took synthetic oil or something. And
Yep.
I said to him, I said, okay, I got this Chevy Cruze. I want to do an oil change. Okay, what does that cost? Well, we don't sell the synthetic oil in the service department, but you can go into the store and buy it off the shelf. I said, okay, that's fine. And then, oh, we don't do this, but you can do that. And I got to the point where I was like, so am I servicing my own car at your
Yeah.
location? Like, do you renting the
They're gonna
whole?
let you. They're
Like,
gonna
what
let
do you
you
do?
borrow their lift for $27, and you can do it yourself, right? If you need a tool, that's another 42.50. Yeah.
And I
No,
called
it's
a Jiffy Lube,
yeah.
and they're like, "Oh, we make the oil in the service department." I said, "What do you mean you make the oil? What are you talking about?"
They're recycling it. You
Yeah, it
know.
was like
Yeah.
it was
No,
crazy.
it's I think I've of course look I've lived my adult life inside a dealership, so
Okay,
obviously I'm definitely slanted, and I love my technicians, and I love my service advisors, who have arguably the hardest job in the dealership as a service advisor, to
right.
translate from a customer to a technician and back again, and try to keep everybody informed. And it's a lot, and we ask a lot of them. So they're so important to building the long-term relationships with the customer, and we have got to make sure that we have compelling offers. Another place that is a point of defection is tires, right?
Oh,
Well, we, we,
100%.
we all buy tires for the same money. Everybody's got the same thing. The tires are basically a commodity item.
Yeah,
And it's funny how when you walk in and you'll see parts managers that they want to charge excessive markups for tires, and then they wonder why they don't sell tires. Well, first of all, you don't have them in inventory, and then you charge an arm and a leg for them, and then you wonder why you don't sell them. But we've got to be the leader in that, and take those customers back. There's as a dealership, and if we need to think about it as a relationship with our client, that we're there to serve their automotive needs, whether it's on the purchasing end, the servicing end, they need a part, even the DIY people. Like, we can help those people, and we want to keep them coming back to our store and having good experiences. And they need to come away saying, wow, those people are so nice. They really helped me. They wanted to help me. Even if we failed,
yeah,
the intention is there, and they can feel that.
yeah. It was funny you bring that up. So I was training in a General Motors store again. They brought in a tire trainer to train their
Yeah.
circuit riders on how to sell tires. And he did this whole thing about this tire versus that, and this is how you do it, and this is how you talk about it, and this and that, right? And then I found out afterwards, we went out to lunch or dinner or something afterwards. He says, "Oh, I own 12 independent service departments in the, at this point, I think it was Greater Toronto. Anyway, it doesn't matter." And I said, "Okay, fine. I'm curious, like, what's your retention number for service for those locations?" And granted, he's servicing used cars or whatever.
Sure.
And his number was 70% retention.
Yep.
And General Motors at the time wanted 40% was their goal. And I said to him, I said, "Okay, how do you get to 70%? And he said, "Sell everybody tires. It's not about making money on the tires. You might make minimal money, but," he says, "if someone comes in and you sell them tires, they're going to come back. If you don't, they're going to be embarrassed that they bought it somewhere else, and they're afraid someone knows that they did that." But the thing that was really interesting wasn't so much the 70%. He said, "How can I get better than 70%?" And I said to him, I said, "In theory, you could get to 100%, but you got to adjust for the fact that you probably got 5 to 10% of customers you don't want as customers just because they're difficult or challenging or crazy." And I said, like, if you're at 70, you're crushing it. But it was kind of interesting that even someone with that high a retention number was still looking for incremental growth. And I always use the example of Brian Benstock. I saw him in 2007, I think it was, or six. And he was talking about lease retention. And he had a number, I think, at the time of 75%. And I said, "What? 75%?" I said, "How did you do that?" And he said, "Well, what we do is we just send him a piece of mail," or at that time it was mail, I guess, or email. Sure. Said, "Hey, we'll put you into a new car for this much a day. Just come by." There wasn't any like difficult anything. It was all just, this is what it's going to cost you for a new whatever, Honda, Acura, whatever it is. And I think he just made it easy. And I think you're 100% right. I mean, I happen to live in a market that has snow. And I bought this car. It's got limited mileage. And I was there for service. So I figured I'd ask about tires. And she said, "Well, let me get you some pricing on tires," which she did. But I was ironically working with a dealer in Greater Los Angeles. And they're in a pretty competitive car market. Not to say Outsiders is good or bad. Happened to be a Jeep dealer. The service writers weren't selling tires, and the service manager was all upset. And I said, "Okay, I'm talking to service writers." And I said, "Well, how many tires do you have in inventory?" They said, "Oh, we don't know." I said, "Well, so if you wanted to set on my car, like how long?" He says, 45 minutes. So I'm looking at the service drive, and they have one of those old school metal racks with the tires drilled to it. They're like bolted.
Oh, yeah.
Said, "Do you have the one tire or do you have four like that?" He goes, "I don't know." So I went over to the parts department. I said, "Okay, do you have any inventory?" And he goes, "What do you mean?" I go, "I got these 4 tires that are bolted that obviously we can't sell. Do you have the other 3 or is it just the one tire?" He goes, "I don't know." So then he looks it up, and all they had in stock was the 4 tires in the drive that were like bolted to this metal thing. So I remember, fast forward, call it a couple of days later, I met with the fixed ops director, large auto group, and he says, "Well, what would it take to get inventory?" I said, "Well, you call a tire distributor, they'll land it. Like, what are you looking for?"
Yeah.
And he goes, "Well, what would you order?" I said, "Well, what came with the car? I don't know." Like, so part of it was just a lack of product. Because I said to him, I said, how quickly do you think I could get a set of tires if I drove down the street in Los Angeles? Like, would it take me 20 minutes? Like, I just drive a couple doors down, there's a guy selling tires, guaranteed.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, they're everywhere.
So that was kind of funny. But the other thing that I think is interesting, and I always use Harley as an example, because 50% of your average Harley dealership's revenue is from stuff with Harley Davidson on it. And I think they're the highest penetration. But I think it's an area that dealers and manufacturers could do better, because if you could accessorize everything, that's probably a good profit margin. I mean, what's your thought there?
Yeah, no, I think customization, look, all the cars, they're great. They're all great cars, and they all starting to look the same, right? Sport utility has a certain shape, whatever. So, people want to be individuals, and they also, when they buy a new car, they want to show that off. So they're accessories for ranging from umbrellas to coffee mugs to, doodads to put on the car that make them look a little different, and some black trim and wheels and tire sets. We miss that opportunity. We get so wrapped up in selling the car and getting the car sold. We never take that extra minute and say, you can do all of these other things if you want to. We're scared we're going to price ourselves out of the market with that. So we let the customer leave, and then they go elsewhere and buy their accessories and spend, especially Jeep. You mentioned Jeep people. Oh wow. I mean, that's like a Lego set. You take a Jeep and you can make it any way you want it. Um,
Oh yeah.
so the running boards for trucks. I mean, wheels and tire kits. What I mean, it's out there, and really, again, it goes back to the original statement we made earlier, and you made it, and I'll make it again. Is we have to make it easy for our customers. We have all the resources at our disposal to be their one-stop shop. Just find out what they want and give it to them. And it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be difficult. It should be very easy and transparent. It's not a bone of contention. It should be a great experience for them. It should be a great experience for us to gain a long-term client and show them that we do appreciate them.
And what's your thought on technology and how it can solve there? I mean, I know that when I do polls on LinkedIn and elsewhere, and I talk to people in the industry, they all talk about it takes too freaking long to buy stuff or whatever it is. I mean, what's your thought on how that's going to change with software and with AI and with just better processes? I mean, what's your thinking there? I mean, how are you dealing with that?
It all hinges on the integration, right? The one thing that we do with all these different tools that we have, you've got an appraisal tool, and then you've got a DMS, and then you've got your
Yeah.
desking tool, and you've got your CRM, and all these different things. And it's funny how we are, especially when you sit you go sit on a sales manager's desk and look at how many windows they have open.
Yeah.
You know, they're sitting there with 20 windows open, yet they're the first ones to complain that the internet's slow, right? So I wonder why. There's four of you up there with 20 windows open, right? And I've got 16 on myself. So it is what it is. So yeah, I think it's really about the integration piece, but we can get through that by being prepared. If we spend slow the deal down at the right times to find out what's important to the customer to give it to them, but then speed it up in the areas where we can. I try to teach our managers to be as ready with figures when they get back from the test drive as we possibly can. Let's consolidate and appraise the car while they're on their test drive. Let's get it out of the way. It takes the same amount of time, and now that's done. And then when they come back, if that's the car that they want to purchase and it'll make them happy, have numbers ready for them. And you already know what they are. Just have them ready. You don't have to wait. That's the key, is all the waiting time, right?
Yeah.
And the waiting time, even though it might be 2 minutes or 5 minutes or 8 minutes, it seems like triple that amount of time to the consumer. So we've just got to be cognizant of that and be on the spot. Like, there's no reason to have a whole lot of waiting around. If you can be proactive, be ready.
Yeah, I mean, I worked with a Toyota store in Beaverton, Oregon, which is one of the largest Toyota stores near the Nike headquarters, I think. And what surprised me not only was the scale of the service department, but they had a really interesting process for sales called Clear, where basically the salesman could pretty much do 90% of the work without the manager even being involved. But more importantly, the customer could configure that car purchase on an iPad or on a desktop or whatever. But it's funny you bring that up with screens. So when I first started selling cars, I think it was 99 or 2000, we didn't even have a computer. Like, the salesman had pieces of paper and pens. Like, that
Yep.
was the stick. Like, there was no CRM for us at all. We were like using note cards or whatever. And I fast forward, I go to the store today. They got two screens each on every desk.
Yep.
But
Yep.
I get there for service at 7:30. There's no salesman to be found till 9
Yeah.
because nobody's there. I mean, the receptionist was there before the sales team. But the thing that was really interesting from my point of view was really, to your point, there's no reason you couldn't do that car deal in an hour, hour and a half tops. And if you did that, I think not only would you get a better CSI, you probably could process more deals. I mean, I've had discussions about obviously staffing and overhead and everything else over the years, but I think the technology itself doesn't solve it. It's a question of what makes sense for the dealer group or the dealership or the dealer team, because we did a show a while ago on AI. We called it the AIO show. And we had Simmons from, remember the name of the group in Arizona. Anyway, Rachel Simmons was on. And she was talking about how she bought all this stuff at NADA and then quickly realized some of the stuff people will never use. She said they're just not ready for it. So it was kind of interesting. But what's the most interesting is just having something to say, like when you're calling that customer or you're using your data to maybe do that. And to your point, if I've got someone out on the test drive with a salesman, I should be appraising the car, coming up with payments, and presenting some options as soon as they get back, not only because it makes sense for the customer, because there's only so much coffee you can drink, but also because that's efficiency. If I'm managing 20 sales guys or 30 sales guys or 10, I can probably add 20% efficiency by just doing it that much faster, right?
One of my favorite things to do is desk deals. Well, training salespeople, training, holding a training class and working through that and having fun with them is number by far my favorite.
Right.
And then, desking deals, of course, I can't discount hanging out in the shop because I'm a gearhead myself. I can't help
Fair
myself.
enough.
I love my techs and hang in the shop. But when it comes to desking a deal, one of my favorite things to do, and the last time I got a chance to really desk deals at a clip plate high pace was when I was a general manager at a Jeep store in Texas.
Right.
And my Saturday routine as a general manager was I came in on Saturday mornings. I did a schedule review. I looked at all my receivables. I wanted to see what my assets looked like, so I was prepared. I looked at the financials to see what the changes was. If we had an increase in policy, I could go over that with the service and parts manager, and let's find out what happened. What was going on, kind of up for my Monday morning meeting. So I did all my financial prep work, and then
Right.
afternoon time, get on the desk.
Yep.
Usually about that time, my sales managers have gone through, especially in August when it's hot,
Yeah.
their appraisals guys getting a little bit winded. So go appraise a couple of cars. Just keep your finger on the pulse and see what was what. But gradually I would kind of take over and I'd have my paper clips, and as new people would come up, I'd take my early TO and I never introduce myself as a general manager. I always say, hey, I'm Lloyd. I'm one of the managers. Bob's going to take great care of you, whatever. I'll take care of all the numbers. Don't worry about that. And when we did our selection, I had my invoice, I had my incentives, I had everything paperclip together. When they got back from that test drive, if they were going to move forward with that car, here's your numbers. And they went immediately back as soon as they sat that customer down with the numbers. And that's what we trained on, and that's what we implemented. And I tell you, it really sped the deal up. Now I don't know, it takes a customer to agree to get in and out in an hour, and you still got to have F&I lined up and detail, so there's a lot of things to do to make that happen. But I think an hour and a half is more than reasonable as an under time, even on a busy day. And I think customers will appreciate it. And you're right, CSI will be right where it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean, when I sold cars, I always used to sell options. So it wasn't about the car, it wasn't about the price, it wasn't even about the process per se. It was about, okay, this is the car you want. Once we've confirmed that, it's about here's a bunch of different ways to pay for it. And I always used to drive my managers before I became a manager nuts because I'd do this on a piece of paper and they'd be printed out for me or whatever.
Yeah, right.
But what was interesting when I started getting into F&I and training F&I, and I'd worked for Nissan at the time, and we were doing menu selling. So we were presenting menus. And what was interesting was when customers are presented with menu options, they tend to pick solutions that the dealer or even the F&I person doesn't understand, because it's really they're choosing from options versus choosing based on a payment. And I think part of that is just really customizing it to the person. And timing is part of it, but also I think the biggest challenge, to your point, in retail is it's not so much time, it's wasted time where you're walking around waiting all the time. And that's really what it is. When you look at, say, a retailer like Apple, to pick one, even if they're busy, say in the holiday season, they're touching that customer and keeping that customer engaged. And I think that's also true with, hotel chains and everything else.
Yeah, I mean, you have to manage those. You have to manage the touch points, and you have to be cognizant of each customer. I mean, don't forget, when it comes down to it, do most customers want a fast and expedient? Yes, they do. But to some others, this is something that they want to take their time with. They want to have, they're okay with slowing things down, and you have to be cognizant to not rush that customer. Whereas at the same time, if you have the customer that is very, very short on time, let's speed the process up for them and get them what they want. So, I think the key is, are we really adaptable? And one of the things that I've found in our business is that we decide on what a process is, and then all of a sudden our managers we become rigid and we say, this is the way that we do it. Well, it is the way that we do it, but you still have to be able to sway when you walk a little bit and be able to be adaptable for your customer, because it doesn't work for everyone. Nothing works for everyone. So yeah, have a foundational process, but be adaptable enough to recognize the customer that you have, what they want, what their needs are, and then just give it to them. And what you'll find out is that you'll learn more about your customers, build better relationships, and then that feeds right into that longevity, loyalty, customer retention conversation we were having earlier.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it from a point of view of gender and generations and experience, and I always use the example of sort of highline stores like Porsche or BMW versus say a midline store like Honda, for example. That person buying $100,000 Porsche product may want to take the time, not only because it's a bigger purchase for them, maybe, but also because they enjoy that sort of luxurious experience, right? I
Yeah.
remember, I think years ago, BMW tried this BMW Genius idea. I don't know if they're still doing it,
Yep.
but at other franchises, let's just use Kia or Hyundai or Toyota, for example. You walk in and the salesmen are all over you, whereas you go to some of these higher end ones and it's like,
A little more relaxed
let the person
atmosphere.
browse first.
Yeah. A little more relaxed atmosphere. And I think there's a fine line to kind of, toe between that, right? We want to make sure that, you want to make sure the customers are attended to, but also given enough space to be able to feel some autonomy too. But most people, there's so much information out there. Most people, when it comes to a major type transaction, which automotive is, they really do need qualified help, and they really want qualified help. So it's the first bit is really not about the car or the business or the process or anything else. It's about making a connection with a person,
Yep.
and being another human that, hey, you know what, we're going to be in this together, and you know what, both everybody has to win. The customer has to feel like they were appreciated, and they like the product and like the person and the place enough to make that investment. And we have to appreciate them for giving us an opportunity to win that business because it's ours to lose.
So, what's your opinion as we roll into 2025? I mean, I know there's a lot of hoopla around the continuing journey of AI, and there's been obviously
Yeah.
some political change everywhere. What's your opinion about what the challenge is? What's your prediction for 2025? Like, what do you think
Uh,
will
I think 2025 is going to be a good year overall. I think we're going to see increased new car volumes with the return of product and some incentives. I think it's going to be a good year to buy a car for the consumer, a better year to buy a car for the consumer. Maybe not so much on the gross profits on the dealer side, which again proves why finance solutions and prepaid maintenance type solutions and retention is really where it's at. People are still keeping their vehicles a little longer for affordability, so there's big opportunity in fixed ops with that customer retention, as long as we keep that customer coming in. So there's it's going to be overall a good solid year. I think there's optimism in the air, a little bit, at least from the dealer body, from what I can tell. But we're in a point now where training and spending our time with growing our teams with our employees to be able to be thoughtful, professional, and empathetic to our customers is really where our number one challenge is. There's been so much turnover.
yeah.
Salespeople that got into the business and they made some quick bucks or whatever happened, and they didn't develop their skills. And part of it is on us as leaders that we didn't do the training that we needed to do all the way through the good times to retain those people. So it's back to basics. It's training. It's embracing technology. It's being adaptable. Again, figuring out what your customer and your market is looking for and giving it to them. And that's really the secret to success.
And what's your opinion on EVs? I mean, I know there's been a lot of hype, but what do you think is going to happen next year with the EV market? I mean, what's your
I think it all depends on legislation and how much incentive money is out there. Because at the end of the day, what moved the EV, there's going to be a migration to it. It's going to continue to grow as a piece of market share. It's just part of it. How fast or how little that goes depends on how good of a deal it is for the consumer. Where what we found out with EVs is that we can't push EVs down to the consumer. The consumer has to pull them through the system.
right?
And they're pulling them through the system with high incentives and low monthly payments, leases, and things like that. So I think as long as those incentives continue, we'll see them continue to make inroads in certain markets. In other markets, that maybe they don't just make sense.
Right. And what's your opinion as a car guy on what product you're excited about seeing in 2025 or that's incoming that maybe, it's got you switched on in the marketplace today? Obviously, Jaguar got themselves in a little bit of hot water, but, what do you think about other brands?
Well, I think we're seeing a resurgence of quality control. Through COVID times. I always joked. People were laughing at me during COVID, and I was like, "You watch what's going to happen. You see people on used car lots in 2024 and 2025 with their toothpick and say, yep, stay away from that. They're 21. That's a COVID car. That's bad quality." You know, And I think we're kind of, we've gotten past that, and the manufacturers are realizing that a lot of them are putting some quality issues. There's a lot of recalls in the marketplace out there right now. So, return to quality is definitely a focus, that we have to have, and reliability. I think that's important to the customer. There's all kinds of great product out there, and I love all cars, so I can get excited about any one of them. But I've got a real hankering for an American made V8. So, any hot rod, push rod V8 muscle car, that's probably right up my alley.
Yeah, it was funny you bring that up. So I was at SEMA, I think last year. What was it last year? Anyway, and they had a whole area of electric cars, 150,000 square feet or something crazy. And I'm walking around this area. I took a bunch of footage. You can check it out on our YouTube channel. But there was a gentleman who had bought an original Gullwing, like the 50s version,
Nice.
and he converted it to electric. And I was sitting there going, oh, I was like, oh, wrong car to do that with. But the thing that was really interesting to me was sort of the interaction between the enthusiast groups, the electric car groups, and the manufacturers that were represented. And I would have expected to be the big three Americans because there were so many pickup trucks at the show. But what I did see was really a push from the Japanese brands, which really kind of surprised me. But when you look at engine technology and you look at V8s to pick an engine, and I think that, really that enthusiast big block vehicle is going to continue to hold its value because you're going to get those old school people say, yeah, electric's kind of interesting. Maybe it's practical, but there's nothing that really replaces that. And I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to. It's hard. Look, we're at the end of the day, people. We're creatures of habit, right? Like you
Yeah,
mentioned, if we go to a restaurant, more than a few times, then they kind of have us or whatever. And I know that to be true. I eat at the same places, and I order the same thing at the same places all the time. And
right.
we're no different when it comes to our cars. There's things that we like. We like the sound of an American V8. Some of us is important, some of us not. Some of us
Yeah,
are purists, some of us don't care. Some
yeah,
of us are okay with four cylinders, and I am too. I've got a four-cylinder Maverick that
yeah,
is kind of our runaround truck, and it's great. I love it. And then you've got some unbelievable fuel mileage. I mean, that in some of the four cylinders and the hybrids that
yeah,
are out there, particularly in the brands that I'm representing now in Honda and Kia, there's some amazing vehicles there. And the more time I spend with them, the more I like them. Because you always find something that you like, and this is neat and that is neat. Um, but I'm a tough nut to crack. I'm a sports car enthusiast at heart, so I'll try to keep and tinker around with a V8 as long as I can.
well, that's funny you bring that up too. There was, I guess, the 911. They're playing around with doing a hybrid and doing a lighter weight one, and then there was all these people saying, well, then that means my big one is not going to be as valuable and all this stuff. I thought that was kind of interesting. But the one that really made me laugh, and this was last year, I think. Anyway, I was walking by a local Ferrari dealership where I used to live, and they had a plug-in electric Ferrari. And they were
Yeah,
asking, I think, $1.9 million for it. And I went in there and I was just curious. I was like, really? Does anyone care about this car at all? Like,
yeah,
why are you even making this? It was really kind of funny. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how that transition happens when you look at Toyota's embrace and Honda's embrace of hybrid technology
yep,
early on, and you look at everyone else kind of doing these PHEVs and other things. Even Jeep, I think, does an electric now of different things.
yep.
And that Hummer, which is basically the heaviest electric
It's a
vehicle
big boy.
you could make. Like it's like a
Yeah.
tank weight or something crazy.
It is an awesome vehicle, though. You got to give
Yeah.
it to him. It's really impressive.
I think it's 20,000 pounds or something crazy like that.
It's a monster. It is a monster, and I mean, the other thing you think about how heavy these cars are is the battery wear and tear, the wear
Yeah.
on the roads, and just the amount of inertia. I mean, the difference between a 4,000 pound vehicle hitting you at 60 miles an hour versus an 8,000 pound vehicle is a big difference. When it comes to trying to keep safety piece down too. So there's a lot wrapped up in that, and at the end of the day, I think the consumers are going to decide what they want to buy,
Yeah.
and affordability definitely plays into that. But the consumers will make their adaptations as they want to. You just can't push it down to them. It's just we're going to buy what we want. We're going to do what we want.
I agree with that 100%. I think when the government starts to tell you what you have to buy to save the planet, for example, not to beat anyone up, that's a mistake. Like people don't want that. They just don't want it. But thanks for
Well,
taking
nobody wants to be told what they can and can't do, right? Regardless of,
100%.
of what it is. So, that's kind of where that comes from. But no, I think it's going to be a really interesting time in our industry, especially I think the next 2 to 3 years are going to be really, really interesting. I think there's opportunity for people to come into our industry and learn some fantastic things. I think it's going to be a lot of changes, fast. And there's all this AI and electric and this and what it's going to be. At the end of the day, people still crave a human connection, and they want a guide, a gentle guide through a very important decision in their lives, whether they're celebrating a promotion, whether it's a car for a kid, a first car, whether it's even coming into service as things have gotten more expensive is a major concern. An unexpected repair can cause a rift through a family, and have to make some difficult choices. So we have to realize that, and we have to like I said, we have to listen to our consumer and try to serve them the best way we can.
Thanks for that. Thanks for taking the time today. I really appreciate it. What brands do you represent? Like, what are the brands you represent?
Right now it's Honda and Kia.
Okay.
My current position is the COO at Scott Auto Group, where we're southwest of Pennsylvania, near Philadelphia. Beautiful community. There's several dealerships around. We also have a Honda store over in New Jersey, just in southern Jersey. Beautiful place as well. So unbelievable team. Joined them back in July, and we are really expanding our footprint. We're our turn rates are good, or the people are learning. It's just a great place to be.
Thanks for that. In the description below, there will be some details on the dealerships, just in case you're looking for a Honda or Kia or maybe a used car. Obviously, definitely feel free to check out the dealerships and give them some business, because that's what's really this is all about at the end of the day. Obviously, very interested in customer experience and treating people right, which we always like to see in the car business. I know the car business gets a bad rap, but that's really not true in most cases, having worked in the business myself. And also, if you're looking for a career as a technician, manager, salespeople, F&I, it's a great industry. And I think it's an industry that a lot of young people and middle-aged people overlook because they have a perception of it. I know when I got into it, even though my family's in the business, my brother thought I was nuts. I've always been a fan of cars, and I agree with you 100%. You're either a lifer in the business or you're not. But I think it's a business that a lot of people, whether they have a college degree or not, just ignore, and I'm not quite sure why. But I appreciate
But it can be so rewarding. I mean, it's a at the end of the day, it's a people business. And then if you happen to like cars and gadgets and technology, it's all that wrapped into one. And along with finances and mechanical, I mean, anything that you think you could find, it's all in our business, which is a wonderful wonderful thing. But the business has changed dramatically. Or when I look at my career, I started selling cars in '98, and here we are, working on the door of 2025, and the old here's a pad of buyer's orders. There's your office. The cars are out there, and
it.
so and so's got the keys. Go watch your videos until you can learn your product. That's not how we do things anymore. We're onboarding people properly. We're teaching skills. We're teaching life skills. We're working on with career pathing, so that people that want to advance through our dealerships have a path to be able to follow, and clear expectations on what duties they need to perform, and to get ahead. And that's really what it's about. It's about developing people to have good long-term teammates, and with good long-term client base. And it's a wonderful place to do business.
100%. Also, it's not boring. So if you're looking for a
No.
job that isn't like working for a post office or the government or in an office cubicle, one thing that got me really interested in the car business when I first started, and still does today, is it's a people business, but it's a dynamic people business. You're not going to see the same thing every day. Situations obviously change, but more importantly, it's fun to help people make a purchase or fix a problem or finance a vehicle. And you'd be surprised with those relationships you build. But more importantly, and this is something I guess I've taken away from it being in it for years, those life skills can be applied to other things like buying a house or negotiating a bank loan or doing different things. And I think those things, a lot of them aren't taught in school. I mean, there's a lot of sales negotiators who, in my opinion, sort of teach it, but there's no substitute for doing that for a period of time. You're going to learn a great deal about how to deal with people from all walks of life. And I think
That's
that's,
right.
I think it's unique. Yeah.
Yeah, you get all pieces. You have people that they come in and buying their first car, they're buying their last car, they're buying points in between, they're helping a sibling, they're helping a spouse, there's whatever we're looking at. People from all walks of life, and they all have unique situations. So again, it's about learning what's important to them in their lives, and giving it to them. And as long as we do that, we earn the right to ask them for their business, and earn the rent every day, to provide good service and ask them to return to us.
100%. I mean, I work with a company that's a sponsor of the show called Vid Calls, and we're adding a new multi-language piece as we roll into 2025. And the thing that was interesting is talking to the company that's helping us with that about the average amount of languages in dealerships today in metropolitan markets. And I think most dealers would say, hey, it's 5 to 10 languages that I deal with, for example. The
Yep,
average shocked me. It was between 30 and 50 languages on average in metro
it's a
markets.
lot. Yeah, I think what one of the things that we looked at, I always looked at, does my internal population of my dealership match my external population in my market? And if it doesn't, why doesn't it? Because it should. We should have people to serve all the people of our community, and promote that. And it's a wonderful thing when you see those synergies and you see the people from every different place, and a bunch of languages being talked. It's a lot of fun. There's never a dull moment in the car business. It's always a unique challenge, that's for sure.
Yeah, we had the opportunity. I think it was at Used Car Week a couple of years ago. Maybe it was last year. There's a company from China called Taibo Cars. So they're like the Carvana of China. And they were there, and we did an interview. We had to speak through an interpreter because they speak Mandarin, I guess. And it was interesting to sort of see the way they interact, like the corporate guys versus the translator was kind of interesting. But what was the most interesting for me, having worked with dealers all over North America and even some in other countries, is it's still the same process. It's just a different culture and language. It's
Yep.
really not that different, whether you're in, Milan, or you're in London, England, or you're in the U.S. or Canada or Mexico. You're still dealing with people to buy transportation. So really, it
Yep.
hasn't changed that much. But I appreciate you taking the time today. I know you're busy. I hope you have a great Black Friday. Hopefully you don't get into fisticuffs with people over a television.
No, no, times are long gone.
Talking to a buddy of mine in Maryland this morning. He's like, "Yeah, I was at Target the other day, and he said they had a TV for $300." I said, "Yeah, they're going to be selling it for $299 tomorrow, and people are going to be fighting over it,
Yep.
saving that $2 or whatever it was."
Yeah, best just to stay away.
Exactly. Have yourself a great day. And if you're at NADA, I'm going to be at the Velo booth. I'm going to be doing interviews. And of course, I'll have free stuff that'll be different for the new season. We're going into the end of season 5, and we'll have season 6 up soon. And have
Really
yourself a
appreciate the
great.
time today, and thank you
Well,
very
no worries.
much.
Thank you.